Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. I want to start off with a big thank you for everybody that viewed my comparison video between Starfield, No Man's Sky, and Star Citizen. It's been a while since I've had a video actually rack up that many views, and it's actually really still reaffirming that there are people out there that actually enjoy my content, and I want to thank you. So today's video is titled aptly, I Want to Prepare You. Now, this isn't a gameplay walkthrough for Starfield. This isn't a gotcha or some form of warning. This is my way of getting you to measure your expectations. As you see behind me, you're viewing gameplay from one of the games that I greatly parallel to Starfield, Mass Effect. Behind me is Andromeda. Andromeda had a very storied launch. Andromeda tried to do a lot of what Starfield is promising to do. Vast worlds, on-ground gameplay, a huge sprawling narrative with meaningful choices. It didn't go very well, and it took Electronic Arts and BioWare over a year to kind of get the game in a fixed and playable state. One of the benefits of Bethesda being bought by Xbox last year was that they insisted that Bethesda put in another year of work ironing out any of the problems that Starfield had. So, with that in mind, I want you to get an idea of what launch is going to look like for Starfield, because Starfield is one of those kind of games like Mass Effect that is going to be very hard to bug fix. Initially, launch is going to look and play out in a very specific way for a lot of people. Now, I'm not going to talk about the disparity between play performance on different consoles or PC. What I'm going to go into immediately is reception and gameplay. Because what we're going to see is something that we saw through the launch of No Man's Sky, through the launch of Elite Dangerous, through the launch of Mass Effect Andromeda. There are people who have invested a lot of things that they think are in the game that don't represent the game. People who don't understand the disparity between a first-person shooter, a realistic space sim, and a narrative-driven role-playing game. Already, as I've watched reactions for Starfield, I already see people immediately engaging in this hyper-speculation based on things that they visually see without listening to what they're being told. Starfield is not strictly a first-person shooter. Starfield is not strictly a space sim, and it's not strictly a role-playing game. It is a hybrid of all three. And thus, in trying to do that, there's inevitably going to be a lot of issues at launch. Now, they may not be game-breaking. Hopefully, Bethesda breaks their spell of releasing buggy, broken games. Skyrim launched that way. Fallout launched that way. Fallout 76, for the love of God, was, as we know. So, launch is going to be... I don't want to temper people's hype for this game, because I, as a lover of space games, watching that direct, I had drool coming out of the corners of my mouth, because I know I want this game to succeed. Not for consoles, not for PC, just for gamers in general. But I want to explain to you a few things about how this is going to go. Launch day is going to be presented with a number of issues. Inevitably, there's going to be a day one patch. Every game gets these. How big it is and how expansive this patch is depends specifically on Bethesda and what they're trying to achieve for launch day. There's inevitably going to be performance improvements. They shipped the gold standard to Xbox for the digital release, for the pre-release, for the 5-day advanced release, and there's going to be a ship standard, an actual launch day standard. They might be different. So for those of us like me who bought in on the 5-day early advance access, we're not going to be looking at probably the same gameplay experience as launch day. Just to warn you. So some of us might actually be performance and bug testing this game for 5 days. Just to warn you. Inevitably, the biggest issues that we're going to see are with what improvements and changes they made to their game engine. Most notably, lighting and animations. Because Bethesda's games are notably stiff. If we're basing this on where Creation Engine was with Fallout 76, there's been a huge improvement to the visual fidelity of Creation Engine. That means shaders, caching, lighting, diffusion. There's a lot of things that they did that may not work well with this launch title. Just again, to warn you, there's going to be a number of things that may not work. Combat. Bethesda is not known for action combat. They are known notably for their VAT system, where combat is stopped, you pick parts of an NPC to target, and then you put it into action. That doesn't exist in Starfield. From all we've seen, that system has kind of been moved onto their ships. So the ground combat is fairly new for them. And they claim that ID Software, the makers of Doom, didn't have a hand in revamping their combat. Bethesda did this in-house. I'm not 100% sure they're being truthful about that, because the vast difference that we saw from a year ago till now is like night and day. Now, granted, as we know with the E3 trailer for No Man's Sky, you can fudge a lot of stuff. So maybe combat isn't as good as we're seeing in the direct. And again, I do not want to put a damper on your expectations and your hopes for this game, because my expectations and hopes are way up here, and maybe they shouldn't be. I should have learned my lesson by now. But maybe, just maybe this time, this might work. So now, I'm going to get into reception, because those 3 types of game players that I mentioned, space sim players, FPS players, and RPG players, are not going to be satisfied. So the first people that we're probably going to see a lot of ranting and raving and negative comments from, and they're going to try to be shitting on your initial experience of the game, are going to be FPS players. And I know that these people are going to be the ones that are going to be the hardest people, not only to satisfy, but to keep quiet. They're going to crap on your and my experience the most, because they think going into this game, they're going to get Call of Duty in space. My dear, dear, dear first-person shooter players, I want to be clear to you. This is not Call of Duty in space. It is never going to be. And do not come at me for my love of the experience of this game, because it's not what you want. Nobody plays a Bethesda game wanting it to be Call of Duty. Nobody plays a role-playing game for it to want to be Call of Duty. I'm not trying to crap on you guys. I love Call of Duty. I love first-person shooters. I come from a long lineage of first-person shooters. But I'm realistic, and I know that this game is not going to deliver that. Second of all, space sim players. Most notably, Elite Dangerous. This is not Elite Dangerous. You're not getting real-time planetary orbits and realistic space distances and long-distance time travel. You're not getting those elements. The gravity is simulated. It's not realistic. You don't have, real-time physics. You don't have, Newtonian physics in space. This is gamified. This is more like No Man's Sky than it is Elite Dangerous. And again, you may not be happy with that. But with all the other things that this game is going to provide for you, most notably Space Sim players, because I love Elite Dangerous. I loved the potential for Elite Dangerous. But Elite Dangerous suffered from feeling like it's just basically space trucking. And the few gamified elements that are in the game, most notably the engineering system and their version of on-foot gameplay, I'll say this, I actually like the ground combat part of Elite Dangerous a lot. It had a lot of potential. It wasn't well implemented, and that's probably going to be the way Starfield happens too. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be groundbreaking. It's just going to do just enough. But again, that's what I want. I'm a lot of us out there just want just enough. We want enough systems that work interconnected together that it's just enough to feel like, Mass Effect Andromeda, for people who don't know, wanted to do No Man's Sky with an RPG. It originally entered development with the idea of hundreds of procedural worlds that you could visit, build bases on, and have a huge overarching narrative. They learned very quickly that their game engine, Frostbite, which powers Battlefield, which is an amazing engine for visual fidelity and first-person shooters, does not work well for making RPGs. It does not handle procedural generation very well. So hopefully, Bethesda made Creation Engine 2 around the procedural elements. They didn't do what they did with Fallout 76 and shoehorn systems in. Fallout 76 took Creation Engine 1 and shoehorned a multiplayer code base into it, and it did not work very well. And it created a plethora of problems that they did not know how to fix. So hopefully, we don't get Mass Effect Andromeda style problems. So now, I want to go on to RPG fans. This is a Bethesda game through and through. We were told that. It may not be as deep as you want. I know I've already heard a number of complaints about the only 4 romance options. We're starting at ground zero with this game. This game is inevitably going to get probably about 4 years of very deep, meaningful updates from Bethesda outside of the bug fixing that they're going to have to do. 1,000 planets of opportunities for handcrafted and story elements. There is a story DLC coming probably about 3 months after launch. They're going to expand on the RPG. You're going to get a base game that hopefully is better than Andromeda. But I'm not making promises to you. And I don't think Bethesda is making promises to you either. Because the whole point of a space game this big is eventually you make your own stories. I have made more gameplay driven stories for myself in No Man's Sky than the developers could ever provide to me. I have gone places and done things and seen things based on what I want to do. And that's really the gist of what Starfield wants to be. So, for those of you that have never played a role-playing game, a space game, something of this breadth, I don't want you to be dissuaded by the day one reception. I don't want you to be dissuaded by people who don't understand what this game is or have unrealistic expectations as to what will be in this game. Because I was there for the hype train for No Man's Sky. And I, as somebody who has experience in game development, notably work on some engines, Unreal 3, Unreal 4, Creation Engine, hearing the things that came out of people's mouths as to what they thought would be in the game, and knowing what the end result would be and the limitations of what you can do with a game engine, there are people who are just wildly, outlandishly over expecting things. We're in an age where game engines can do amazing things, developers can do amazing things, and my God, the computers that we have today can do amazing things. But I want to prepare you for inevitabilities, things that don't work, things that maybe you thought would have more breadth and depth to them, but don't. But understand, we're gonna come in ground zero. We're gonna have 100 planets with crafted and hand touched things like quest lines, NPCs, points of interest. 100 planets, guaranteeing you, even if you rush the main story, probably about 100 hours of gameplay. 100 hours. And if you're somebody like me that works a full-time job and can maybe play 2-3 days a week, that could last me the next 6 months before I ever get DLC. I may never finish the main story in Starfield, to be absolutely honest with you guys, because I'm one of those people that when I get into a space game, I go, oh, look at that, I can go there. And a lot of other people do that too. So I don't want you to put all your eggs in one basket expecting the world. The world is going to come. It may not be there day one, but it's going to come over the course of a development cycle. And Bethesda is going to learn some things, because as much as you can QA test, the biggest bug search happens by players. Players, believe it or not, because we have a multitude of different game systems, different gameplay styles. A lot of us are very proficient at breaking games and exploiting exploits and just finding things that developers, through all of their hard work, may never find. Yeah, we are the bug testers. As horrible as that sounds, being considered a bug tester, we are the people that find things. But remember too, the best part about Creation Engine, and I want to be clear for every detractor out there, I am not saying modders are responsible for fixing Bethesda games, just to be clear. But the best thing about Creation Engine, the best thing, it is bizarrely flexible for modding. Skyrim is 10 plus years old and is still getting innovative mods that do things that the game developers never thought the engine could do. So much so that Bethesda has hired some of those modders, and they're not the only company that does that. Studio Wildcard, with the Unreal 4 engine, actually hired modders in their community for the work that they did. So there's so much potential out there, not just from the shipped base game that we get, but the imagination and creativity of the community. And I want to tell the average person out there that has never experienced the community in sci-fi games. One, we are very passionate about science and exploration. We are very passionate about science fiction IPs like Star Trek, Star Wars, The Expanse, Battlestar Galactica. We are so passionate about introducing the world of science and space exploration to people that we are a creative and inclusive community. And people puke when they hear that, but it truly is that. I've met some of the most amazing people playing Elite Dangerous, Star Citizen, and No Man's Sky. People who have not just a love for explaining things to people, but helping them to get passionate about things that they normally wouldn't, about science and planetary exploration, and also explaining things to people that they may have never understood. So you're in for a really awesome ride if Starfield delivers even 80% of what we were shown. So once again, thank you so much for getting so many views on my previous video. Even if this one gets a fraction of that, I will be so happy. And I really look forward to exploring more about what Starfield has to offer as we get more information from Todd Howard, the team at Bethesda, and the inevitable number of leaks that have been going on with the FTC America lawsuit between Activision Blizzard and Bethesda and the United States government. It's an amazing time and an interesting time for gaming these days. And I want to end this on one more note. Normally, I don't discuss console wars. I really don't. I don't care about them. And I want to explain to you why. I don't. Platform exclusivity for games is bad. No matter how you try to sell it, regardless of which team it comes from, Xbox or PlayStation, exclusivity is very bad for gaming. And I want to say this. Regardless of what platform you're on, but mostly to my PlayStation friends, you have an ocean of amazing games to play on both platforms. It is not worth fighting over one of them. And I want to be clear. If Sony wants to, Sony can make their own Starfield. Sony has a stable of amazing developers that they work with. They have Bungie right now. Bungie is making an interesting looking shooter game along the veins of Destiny. But they have other developers too. So if Sony wants to, if they really wanted to, they could make their own Mass Effect, their own Starfield. You're not being left out in the cold by Starfield being exclusive to PC and Xbox. I know it's upsetting. But I want to explain one more thing to you guys. These are decisions made by corporations, not gamers. And the best way you can get them to stop doing this is by voting with your wallets. And I'm not saying end PlayStation as a company. I'm not saying end Xbox, Microsoft as a company. That's stupid because that would hurt a lot more people than it would help. But Redfall was bad. Xbox has an interesting history of anti-competitive practices. They are being exposed for doing that in terms of buying out companies. And Sony is no different with their timed and platform exclusives. Gamers, vote with your wallets. If you are tired of Sony's stance with exclusivity, resistance to cross-platform play and save, arguably another dumb decision, vote with your wallets, but don't take it out on each other. Because we are at the pinnacle right now of gaming. If you don't understand what it was like 15 years ago, where you had maybe 1 or 2 AAA releases a year, now we get 10, 15 a year. We have whole months jam-packed with games. It's literally impossible to actually play all these games. Look at your Steam library. Look at all the games that you see on Game Pass that you're like, how the hell am I going to have time to play all these? We are in a golden age of gaming. But corporations are trying to make it harder for you. Don't make it harder on each other. And if anything, again, my PlayStation friends, talk to Sony. Say, Sony, look, there is so much hunger by the gamers on our platform for games like Mass Effect, for games like Star Citizen, for games like Elite Dangerous. Can you please, you guys have amazing developers, Guerrilla Games. Can you please work with your first and third party developers and give us one? Give us one. Because you deserve it, guys. I was a PlayStation boy for a long time. My PlayStation 2 is still sitting in my house. I still actually use it. I have more games for my PlayStation 2 than I actually have in my Steam library. That's how much of a PlayStation boy I was. I left PlayStation because I don't like exclusivity. And I felt cornered. Cornered from a plethora of amazing games that I could not get. And the same thing applies to Xbox. So again, thank you, like and subscribe, and if you found this video helpful and informative, keep an eye on my channel, and I'm going to tell you right now, I will be doing the 5-day early access for Starfield. I'm not sure where I'm streaming it. It's probably going to be YouTube. I might co-stream on Kick. Probably not, but we'll see. As always, be good to each other. See everybody later.